When people search how many days to spend in Luxor, most Egypt itineraries suggest 2. On paper, that sounds reasonable, but once you understand what Luxor actually includes, the question becomes more complicated. Luxor isn't a single site, it's an entire region divided by the Nile, and each side offers a completely different experience. If you're planning a Luxor itinerary, that geographic split matters more than most travelers expect. On the east bank of Luxor, you have Karnak Temple and Luxor Temple, massive temple complexes, colonnades, hypostyle halls, relief carvings that take time to absorb. On the west bank of Luxor, you have the Valley of the Kings, Hatshepsut's Temple, the Valley of the Queens, Medinet Habu, Deir el-Medina, and the Colossi of Memnon. Tomb interiors, painted burial chambers, archaeological sites that require patience and timing. And moving between these places isn't instant. You cross the Nile, you factor in travel time, you deal with heat, tour group congestion, and the fact that tomb access rotates depending on conservation schedules. And so when someone asks how long to stay in Luxor, what they're really asking is, how much depth do I want? And if you allocate 2 days in Luxor, here's what that realistically looks like. 1 day on the East Bank, you'll likely spend about 3 hours at Karnak if you move steadily, possibly less if you're following a group schedule. Luxor Temple gets another hour and a half, maybe 2 if you linger. The next day goes to the West Bank, Valley of the Kings in the morning. Your standard Valley of the Kings ticket includes 3 tombs, but which tombs are open depends on the daily rotation schedule that isn't published in advance. Then Hatshepsut, then a quick stop at the Colossi, possibly a sunrise hot air balloon if you wake up early enough. By the end of those 2 days, you've seen the highlights. You've walked through the major temple corridors. You've entered decorated tomb chambers. You've covered what most tour operators classify as the essential Luxor experience. But it's compressed. 2 days in Luxor works. It shows you the major sites, but it doesn't leave much room for flexibility. You probably won't revisit Karnak when the light shifts in late afternoon. You likely won't add the Valley of the Queens unless you sacrifice time elsewhere. Medinet Habu may not fit. Deir el-Medina often doesn't make the schedule at all. And because Valley of the Kings tomb access changes, if the tomb you researched is closed that day, you may not have time to return. If you extend your Luxor itinerary to 3 days, the rhythm changes, and you're no longer moving site to site with a fixed clock. You can spend longer inside tombs. You can return the next morning if a specific burial chamber was closed. You can add a second West Bank site without rushing through it. You can experience Karnak with fewer tour groups later in the day. With 4 days in Luxor, something else shifts. Luxor stops feeling like a stop on your Egypt itinerary. It starts feeling like the center of it. That's the part many travelers don't anticipate when they're planning Egypt for the first time. Cairo feels like the headline, the pyramids are iconic, the Grand Egyptian Museum draws attention, but Luxor contains an extraordinary concentration of preserved temple architecture and decorated tomb interiors within a relatively compact area. And because many Egypt itinerary templates allocate 3 nights to Cairo and 2 to Luxor, the balance subtly favors introduction over depth. That doesn't make those itineraries wrong. It reflects priorities. If your goal is to see the pyramids, the museum, and then experience the major Upper Egypt highlights, 2 days in Luxor fits within that structure. But if your priority is tomb interiors, temple detail, and having margin in case access changes, 2 days begins to feel tight. Another factor most planning guides don't emphasize is variability. Valley of the Kings tomb rotation changes. Certain tombs close for conservation without long notice. Weather impacts comfort and timing. Balloon flights shift depending on wind conditions. Once you're physically there, you may realize you want to revisit a site you initially rushed. Additional days create flexibility. Without that margin, your experience depends entirely on how efficiently everything aligns during your short stay. There isn't a universal answer to how many days you need in Luxor. 2 days shows you the highlights, 3 days allows depth, 4 days gives you margin. The right number depends on whether you value coverage or immersion in your Luxor travel plan. But understanding what each option realistically allows you to see makes planning much clearer. Luxor isn't difficult to organize. It simply requires realistic time expectations. And once you understand that, you can design your broader Egypt itinerary around Luxor instead of compressing it to fit a pre-built schedule. If you're planning Egypt in 2026, look carefully at how many full mornings and evenings your Luxor stay actually includes. Not just how many days are listed, but how much uninterrupted time you truly have on each bank of the Nile. That's where the experience changes. Subscribe for real-time Valley of the Kings updates, tomb access changes, and detailed Luxor itinerary planning breakdowns so you can build your trip with clarity.